Welcome back to my YouTube channel. We are in the Python basic series for beginners, and this would be our last video for this series, wherein we will be discussing Python to database connectivity. So let's jump in straight away with the code that connects to the database. So there are a few requisites for prerequisites for this video. First, you need to have MySQL server installed in your machine, and Python any version to be installed on your machine. And after that, you also need to have mysql.connector library installed. That's it. If these three things are there, and then we can get started with this code. All right. So the first statement, we need to import a library that we installed, that is mysql.connector, to connect from a Python code to an SQL server. So you would see here I've also downloaded and installed MySQL Workbench to connect to MySQL server. Okay, so when you install, you might customize. You install when you install MySQL server, you might customize installation by installing MySQL Server Workbench, MySQL Server Shell if required, if someone is compatible with Shell, and MySQL Server itself. All right. So after you install, you need to download this download and install MySQL.connector library, and then proceed with the code. Okay. So the first line, we need to create a connection object. Now, how do we create the connection object to connect to a MySQL server? So there in MySQL.connector, we have a connect method wherein you can specify the host in the sense, maybe the IP address. If your MySQL server is installed on some remote machine, you can give that IP address over here. However, in our case, we have installed MySQL server in this machine itself, so I have given it as localhost, and then the username and password for the connection to the MySQL server. So whatever username and password you have set on MySQL server, the same username and password you will be providing here. All right. Then I'm just trying to print my connection object, so that I'm sure that the connection got established. When I see in the I would be seeing the same in the output. All right. Then we create a cursor object, which is created by using cursor method on my connection object. All right. And after that, what I'm trying to do is create a database. So I name my database as a test database, and to execute this SQL query, if you are aware of SQL, you would be knowing that this is an SQL query to create a database. So to create a to execute this query through Python, we need cursor object. That's the reason we created the cursor object, and in that cursor object, there we have execute method where we can put the query and execute it accordingly, whatever we require. If you want to create a database, we write a create database. If you want to write a select query, if you want to create a table, you can put that as well. All right. So whatever SQL query will be there, you will execute using cursor object. That is very important to know. Moving ahead, what we are trying to do is we are trying to see the show database output as well. So you would see the SQL query again show data. So whatever SQL query it may be, you just need to put it in cursor dot execute method. All right. And if you look at this, we have kept this code in try and except block, because in case some error happens while creating database or showing the information, fetching the data, whatever it is, so it should be handled, and whatever changes we are trying to do to create a database or to create a table, it should be rolled back. And this for loop is for printing whatever is there in cursor. So in this cursor, maybe there are databases in number of databases, so one by one the loop will iterate over and show all the databases to you, and finally we close the connection using the connection object. So that's all the explanation about the code. Now let's run this code in command prompt. So I am already in a directory where my file is stored. My file name here is mysql.py. So I'll just use the same, running the file python space mysql on. There you go. We created test database, and that's the output we see. These are the all the databases that were already present before our code, and the one we created is this one, test database. Now say if you want to do some different operations using this database, even then you can do it. Okay. Let's once verify if it got created in Workbench. So to see that, we have this command show databases, and the new database that created would reflect here. Obviously, without the database being created there, it wouldn't have reflected here. And just for verification from Workbench as well, I just checked over there. Now say if we want to create a table, all right. So how would you do that? Only the thing would happen is that your query here would change. Instead of create database, you will specify um, in this code. Uh, Instead of create database, you will specify the query for create table. That's it. And you will have to add one additional parameter over here mentioning in which database you want to create that table, right? So let's move on with that code now. I have a separate file for that to make you understand this better. All right. So check that file where it is. Same folder. I have a file called table. Just for your understanding, I kept the code separate for separate operations. Okay. So I'll just name it as table. Now I will show the code first as well. Look at this. As I mentioned earlier, the only change that will be done here is just hold on. I'll make the necessary changes. Password, root and the username and password. Then the database that we created. There is database, and the rest all is fine. We are trying to create a table name called employee. Okay. You would see here there is not much change in the code. The only thing is we mention the database name that we created and the credentials that we need to connect to the SQL server. That's it. So I'm just creating a table called as employee in a database, test database. So let's see if this gets executed properly. Uh, okay. There is no error. That means this got executed. Just because I did not print anything on the screen, I'm not able to see what got created. So to check that, you may go here and just check here, use database, test database, run this. Now, yeah, now it is cool. So this got executed. Now here, what do I want to see? I want to see if the table is created or not. So I'm just doing select star from employee. So to know these queries, you should have some knowledge of SQL. All right. So if I do a select star from employee, let's see if I get something. Oh, it's a spelling mistake. Yeah, you would see here that the table name it is showing the table employee with name, ID, salary, and department ID. Until now, we haven't inserted anything. Now I have a separate file again to insert some data. So you will insert, you will update, you will do a number of operations that are allowed through SQL queries. So for example, I will just show it to you how to insert things. So I have a different code. It's not necessary that you always create a different file. In the same file, you may create a table, you may insert. But just for your understanding, is that I'm showing it differently. So this is the one that is for inserting. This is the code for inserting. I will make the necessary changes that I require. Okay. So test something something again here test. Then database name. I'll just change database. And I have four columns, so I don't need this branch name. This is a already prepared code. That's the reason. I have to make some changes here. That's it. Now, if you would see, there is a small change here. I have a variable called as SQL. I insert into employees. I put an insert query over here, and whatever values I give, it will be taken by this percentile s. All right. So John would go in name, in ID. This 103 would go in ID, 110, and this value will go in salary, and 201 will be the department ID. So that's it. I save this file and I will run it. Simply run it. Okay. And what I'm executing, as I said, whatever SQL query you write, you'll have to use the execute method, and this is what will actually do the task for you. So let's run this file and check whether we get appropriate result. So again, the same command python then insert.py, insert.py. That's it. You get this. You get the message that run a record inserted. So let's see if it got inserted from here. Again, I run the same query and check whether one record got inserted. Look at this. Whatever query we wrote, we got the record inserted. Now, if you are already aware, as you should be, for the if you are looking at this video about the SQL queries, then you would understand what I'm trying to convey here. Now you have inserted, you may update, you may delete. It's all about executing SQL queries, right? So the only change that will happen is while you execute what you want to execute. If you want to delete something, there will be a delete query over here. If you want to insert something, there will be insert query. Then if you want to update something, there will be SQL update query. That's it. So that's all about how you connect and how you perform different operations, that is SQL operations using a Python code. You might say, Vishal, but why? Where would we use all these things? See, you have to think from a bigger perspective that if you are doing a project, right, there will be some forms, all right. So in those forms, forms in the sense graphical forms where you enter data, name, employee name, salary, or maybe for any other data, might be some data of a retail store. You might be entering mobile number, customer details, name, then age, and so on. These things will be getting stored somewhere. It's not like for once it gets entered and then it vanishes. The details will be getting stored somewhere, and where it will it get stored? It will get stored in database. So you might be wondering where does Python code come here? Because whenever you store something, how that gets stored? See, on that form it might be a button that you would see asking for submitting the details or something, right? But when you click that submit button, you check that okay, whatever the details are there, that should go in database. It doesn't happen magically, right? So whenever you click on submit button, there should be some query language that sends the data into the database, and that is this language, that SQL. All right, in this case, so for uh, on that click of that button, there will be a code inserting the values into the database. So whatever we wrote for insert, a similar code will be there in while you insert. All right. So while you insert any data, similar code will be there on the click of submit button. And similarly, when you fetch the information, when you go to the same store next time, they will ask your mobile number or some unique value, and they fetch the information. At that time, the select query will run. So this is the application of what we did today. All right. We saw a very basic code wherein we connected to the database and how we can actually fetch the data from the database, store the data into the database, and using the update query, you can change the data in the database. So that's all for today. And just before closing, I just forgot to mention this. This is nothing but what the connection object that we printed while we established the connection via MySQL. We printed the connection object as well. So this line here we established the connection and we also did a printing. So I just remember that I did not explain this part. So I'm just letting you know that this doesn't come from anywhere from my SQL connector library directly. However, it is a part of our code. We printed the connection object. All right. So that's all for this video, and see you in the next module, because this was the last video of our Python basic series for beginners. So thank you for being with me. Thank you for being with me um, in this series and being patient to listen to all the videos. Thank you very much. I will see you in next module that will be launched sooner. All right. Thank you.